Hi, Peter. I don't know about others. I'd like to know what you really think about Checo, be honest.
Yeah, Ghost Dog, cool name. I presume you're Mexican, so I better not be too hard on Sergio. But I have been saying for a long time how good Sergio is with the back end of the car. It's very easy to say, oh, he's really good at tyre management. What does that mean? What it means is he's got this velvet touch with the right foot when it comes to how much power to put through the loaded rear when he's accelerating, particularly out of slow corners. And that is a skill that is very rare to be as precise as Sergio is and is able to do. I think JENSON had that, Kimi had that in the McLaren days, not so much now, or then, retired as he is now. JENSON certainly had that, and that was JENSON's calling card, really, the way he could look after the rear like that, and also great overlap, a perfect overlap in terms of, well, no overlap in the case of JENSON. But Sergio does that really well too, and that's the reason he can manage the tyres so well, because he looks after the rears in such a way that other drivers don't. I think the downside to Sergio is that I don't think he's brilliant when the car's got understeer, and I don't think he's brilliant when it's got crosswind and the back end's a bit unpredictable, or indeed when the grip level changes dramatically quite quickly front to rear. But if you give him a good set of tyres in a well-balanced car on a consistent surface, he's as good as anyone, really. He's phenomenally good because he's so good out of slow corners. And I think he's to his credit. I mean, if you think how he was in the wet, thinking Turkey last year, 2020, he was really good then. So, you know, he's driven some good wet weather races, so he's not all bad in that department. Very good in defence, really good concentration level, very, very difficult to pass. I'm not talking about Abu Dhabi now, I'm just talking in general, really good in defence. Gets into a rhythm and just stays there, and he's really nice to watch. But then we had Abu Dhabi, and I don't put what he was doing with Lewis in Abu Dhabi in that category at all. I put that in I think it was nonsense, really. It was crass to me, the way he drove there. And I suppose that shows the other side of his, I don't know what really, I mean, loyalty to the team, I guess, but I'm not sure even they expected him to be that aggressive. And don't get me wrong here, I've got nothing against drivers or the concept of a teammate holding up a quick opponent to help his teammate. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, if you think 75 US Grand Prix, I think it was, when Nicky had already won the championship at Monza, they got to Watkins Glen, and there was quite a lot of aggro between Ferrari and McLaren. And I don't know, I think Clay, it was Nicky's teammate at Ferrari, Clay Regazzoni, had some sort of incident early on in the race and lost quite a lot of time in the pits. And when he came out in the race, Nicky and Emerson were pretty close. Nicky was leading, and they came up to catch Clay, who had lost all this time. And I think he let Nicky pass straight away, and then he held up Emerson for at least, I don't know, half a dozen laps probably. And eventually, I mean, there was a massive furore over this, and eventually he was black flagged, and there was a big drama. I think Luca Montezemolo, from memory, told him to ignore the black flag or something, and then he retired him out of protest or some. Sorry, I wish I could be a bit more accurate, but it was something along those lines. There was a big drama about the fact that Clay had held up Emerson, and Emerson was obviously very upset about it, and the race went clearly to Nicky then. But, and here's the big but, I don't remember Clay doing any of the things that Sergio was doing at Abu Dhabi. He wasn't effectively trying to drive the other guy off the road whenever he got near him. He was just using all the road and going quite slowly, but making it really impossible for Emerson to pass. And he just found the right rate at which to do that. Emerson couldn't outbrake him, couldn't do this, but he was nonetheless losing a second a lap to Nicky at the time. Really nice bit of driving by Clay, actually, if you think about it. But that's not what Sergio did, and it was part of function of the modern era, I guess. Having, you know, he eventually Lewis would get past, and then DRS would enable Perez to have another go at him, and there was so much of this. I was completely shocked actually by that, and it's not. I felt very uncomfortable watching that. I don't think that is part of Formula One. I'm surprised there was nothing said about it, and I just hope that doesn't become the norm. You know, this sort of business of, well, you know, if you come near me, we'll both go off to the boondocks, and it'll help the teammate because he's ahead on points. And I think that's wrong. And it's very uncharacteristic of Sergio Perez to do that, because he's normally he's very clean when he's in a defence mode, but he wasn't here. This was all over the place. Anyway, that's what I think. And I guess that part of that was the whole hype of the race and Red Bull and, you know, take him out or whatever they were saying. I don't know. And then there was that really weird thing, wasn't there, at the end there when he stopped, was it 4 or 5 laps from the end of the race? He didn't even know why they were calling in, it seemed. You know, why am I stopping now? And they brought him in. And afterwards they said something along the lines of, you know, the car was, I don't know, he said the car was getting worse, so we had to stop it or something. Didn't seem as if it was getting worse at the time when Sergio didn't know why he was coming in. And I still wonder about that. I don't know whether everybody else does. A couple of mates of mine have come up with some fairly scurrilous suggestions, which won't be repeated here. Although maybe, you know, one of them, I don't know. You know, you fill the car up with less fuel than it needs to finish the race on the basis that you are going to retire it, and it's going to be lighter, and it's going to give you an easier car to do what you like with. I don't know. Obviously that's not allowed because you're supposed to start with the right amount of fuel in the car. But I guess you could do that. I don't know. Maybe somebody out there can put me right on that. But to me, that's about the only thing you could do and get away with it if you do what Red Bull did and sacrifice points and a finish. But nonetheless, he's got a really quick race car because it's lighter than everything else. I don't know. We'll see. Let's have the next one. Hi, Peter. I just wonder whether the number of engine penalties Valtteri took this season was the reason he was usually quicker than Lewis in a straight line. Steen Vandenborn. Good question. Is it because he was consistently quicker? If you take an average over the year, certainly in a straight line, when it was terminal velocity, Valtteri was usually 2 to 3 clicks quicker than Lewis. I think it's hard to believe that if that was luck, you know, or whatever, just per chance, that every time Valtteri got an engine, it was slightly better than Lewis's, and Mercedes presumably wouldn't have wanted that because they would always like the best engine to go to Lewis. So that's a bit odd. I think probably more the case is that I'm just thinking about it, probably when they get to a track and they start running on Friday and maybe into Saturday, maybe even into the race, they probably give Valtteri less downforce than Lewis by small margins, just to see what the edge of the envelope is and what lap time can be done with what they think is the minimum amount of wing. And if it works, they take Lewis to that point. But if it doesn't, they bring Valtteri down. I think it's probably a setup thing like that, and if it is that, you know, all credit to Valtteri that he's done that all year and last year as well, because that is really playing the role of a very good teammate to a driver like Lewis. Thank you very much for that. This one is from Kyle Busker. Hi, Peter. Can you please explain the theory of the toe in Formula One? Yeah, I mean, the toe is... Go and watch Grand Prix, that fabulous movie from 1966. I mean, that really shows you what the toe is. They get to Monza and there's no DRS, no wings on the car, so therefore no DRS, obviously. And you get up behind the car, and because that car's effectively creating a hole in the air, you're in this vacuum, and it sucks you into the back of the car. And you can hear them in the film as they're catching the car in front in the toe. You can hear them coming off the throttle in top gear. And that's a real thing. That's what they did before wings were on the car. When they were in a tow at Monza, for example, they saved fuel by sitting behind another car and coming out of the throttle a little bit and cruising. And then when it wanted to pass, you flatten the throttle and you go past. It was a brilliant thing. And we don't really see that or talk about that very much because of DRS these days. And it's kind of, and I'm not a DRS fan only because it's artificial. I'm not massively into anything artificial. So I think this is pure cotton. I think it is 100% cotton. Buy it on the channel. Yeah, I'm not a great fan of anything artificial, but I would say, I mean, it reminds me of Nigel when he was at Williams in the FW14B, actually 14A and 14B. There was a moment when, I think it was at Canada, when Ricciardo had the final drive went. And I remember we were very concerned about whether we were overloading it and what caused that. And there was, everything looked to be right in terms of the size, the metallurgy, everything was correct.
And I remember talking to Patrick Head a couple of weeks after that. And he said, oh no, what we found was that Nigel, when he was at Ferrari in 1990, with the electronic paddle shift that he had on that beautiful John Barnard car, got into the habit of whenever he was on an upshift, he came out of the throttle slightly on the upshift, just to make things a little bit easier for the car mechanically. Whereas Prost didn't, interestingly. And Nigel did that when he got to Williams that second time in 91, 92. He was always feathering the throttle slightly this is on the electronic gear change, as he got it on an upshift from 5th to 6th, for example. And that's why he didn't have any diff failures and final drive failures on that car. And they then simulated that, put that into the program for Ricciardo. So Ricciardo could still basically stay flat, but the revs were compensated for by the electronics. And they got that from Nigel's natural slightly backing off. And I was talking to Steve Nichols the other day, actually, about, and there is a video out now, Perfect Car on a Perfect Day. If you're a McLaren Senna MP4 and Bruce McLaren Can-Am fan, please watch it. A lot of fun making that film, thanks to Bart Horston, young Australian F3 driver, and his sponsors as well for helping us make that. But I was talking to Steve about this. We were talking about the difference between Prost and Senna, and he said Senna would spend hours and hours and hours with the Honda people trying to find one or two more revs if he moved the throttle like this or like that. And it was nothing to do with his throttle blipping. As I said before, Senna always wanted to get out of that habit. That was nothing to do with what he was doing. He was trying to find out if it was better to be absolutely flat or not absolutely flat in certain situations. And he was saying that, Prost was always leaving slight margin on revs on upshifts and downshifts, whereas Ayrton was always at the absolute maximum. And over a season, he probably had, I don't know how much more power, but he certainly had, in percentage terms, I would think 1 or 2% more power out of that engine compared with Prost. But Prost was happy with that because that was the way he'd always driven. And I think it was like that with Nigel as well. So anyway, all that came from the question about the toe. And just so you know, the new F1 cars for next year, 2022, are going to have DRS still. I'm sorry to say. Anyway, that's just me. I'm Mr. Anti-DRS. Anyone know what brand sunglasses Peter's wearing? Wouldn't be these by any chance. These are... what are they? Okay, these are Izzy Pizzy, IZI-PIZI, Izzy Pizzy. I bought them because I bought them in the Conran shop in London, which is a really nice shop. It's about the cheapest thing I could find in the shop to buy. And that's in a lovely part of London in Chelsea. And it's part of the old Michelin tyre, I'm not say factory, it was the tyre warehouse back in the 1920s. Beautiful tiles, and it's the Bibendum building. It was the original Michelin building in London, beautiful building, and that's now the Conran shop. And so, yeah, it is one of my favourite places, but it's also one of my favourite places because Stefan Johansson used to live opposite in an apartment just overlooking the Conran shop in that part of Chelsea in London. And interestingly, Stefan wears these glasses as well. So if Mr. Super Cool Stefan Johansson, ex-Ferrari driver, now sensationally talented artist who works from a converted chapel by the beach, surf beach in California, I mean, how cool is that? If he wears these, then I thought, well, PW can wear them as well. So yeah, Izzy Pizzy, pretty cool, I think. Well, pretty nice anyway. There you go. Not very expensive. That's a good thing about them. All right, next one. OT77 Racing. It sounds impressive. Said it for years now. Get rid of the carbon brakes to increase the braking distance. Well, yeah, I mean, I always thought that too. And then Ross Brawn told me when he was launching the 2022 car that actually going to cast iron brakes from carbon would make no difference to overtaking or elongating the braking distance because the effect of the downforce and the tyres, the grip level is so high that going to those brakes wouldn't make any difference. So all I can do is repeat that. I find that hard to believe, but nonetheless, all I can do is repeat it. Better people than I have said that.